I looked out for Mr. Barkis, but he was not there, and instead of him, a fat, short-winded, merry-looking little old man in black, with rusty little bunches of ribbons at the knees of his breeches, black stockings and a broad-brimmed hat, came puffing up to the coach window and said, "Master Copperfield?" "Yes, sir." "Will you come with me, young sir, if you please," he said, opening the door, "and I shall have the pleasure of taking you home." I put my hand in his, wondering who he was, and we walked away to a shop in a narrow street, on which was written Omer, draper, tailor, haberdasher, funeral furnisher, etc. It was a close and stifling little shop, full of all sorts of clothing, made and unmade, including one window full of beaver hats and bonnets. We went into a little back parlour behind the shop, where we found 3 young women at work on a quantity of black materials which were heaped upon the table, and little bits and cuttings of which were littered all over the floor. There was a good fire in the room and a breathless smell of warm black crepe. I did not know what the smell was then, but I know now. The 3 young women, who appeared to be very industrious and comfortable, raised their heads to look at me and then went on with their work. Stitch, stitch, stitch. At the same time, there came from a workshop across a little yard outside the window a regular sound of hammering that kept a kind of tune. Rat-tat-tat, 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 without any variation. "Well," said my conductor to one of the 3 young women, "how do you get on, Minnie?" "We shall be ready by the trying on time," she replied gaily, without looking up. "Don't you be afraid, father." Mr. Omer took off his broad-brimmed hat and sat down and panted. He was so fat that he was obliged to pant some time before he could say, "That's right." "Father," said Minnie playfully, "what a porpoise you do grow." "Well, I don't know how it is, my dear," he replied, considering about it. "I am rather so." "You are such a comfortable man, you see," said Minnie. "You take things so easy." "No use taking them otherwise, my dear," said Mr. Omer. "No, indeed," returned his daughter. "We are all pretty gay here, thank heaven, ain't we, father?" "I hope so, my dear," said Mr. Omer. "As I've got my breath now, I think I'll measure this young scholar. Would you walk into the shop, Master Copperfield?" I preceded Mr. Omer in compliance with his request, and after showing me a roll of cloth which he said was extra super and too good mourning for anything short of parents, he took my various dimensions and put them down in a book. While he was recording them, he called my attention to his stock in trade, and to certain fashions which he said had just come up, and to certain other fashions which he said had just gone out. "And by that sort of thing we very often lose a little mint of money," said Mr. Omer. "But fashions are like human beings. They come in, nobody knows when, why or how, and they go out, nobody knows when, why or how. Everything is like life, in my opinion, if you look at it in that point of view." I was too sorrowful to discuss the question, which would possibly have been beyond me under any circumstances, and Mr. Omer took me back into the parlour, breathing with some difficulty on the way. He then called down a little breakneck range of steps behind a door. "Bring up that tea and bread and butter," which, after some time, during which I sat looking about me and thinking, and listening to the stitching in the room and the tune that was being hammered across the yard, appeared on a tray and turned out to be for me. "I have been acquainted with you," said Mr. Omer, after watching me for some minutes, during which I had not made much impression on the breakfast, for the black things destroyed my appetite. "I have been acquainted with you a long time, my young friend." "Have you, sir?" "All your life," said Mr. Omer. "I may say before it. I knew your father before you. He was 5'9½", and he lays in 25 foot of ground." Rat-tat-tat, 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 across the yard. "He lays in 25 foot of ground if he lays in a fraction," said Mr. Omer pleasantly. "It was either his request or her direction, I forget which." "Do you know how my little brother is, sir?" I inquired. Mr. Omer shook his head. "Rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat. He is in his mother's arms," said he. "Oh, poor little fellow. Is he dead?" "Don't mind it more than you can help," said Mr. Omer. "Yes, the baby's dead." My wounds broke out afresh at this intelligence. I left the scarcely tasted breakfast and went and rested my head on another table, in a corner of the little room which Minnie hastily cleared, lest I should spot the mourning that was lying there with my tears. She was a pretty, good-natured girl, and put my hair away from my eyes with a